Welcome to Discovering. We're off to Newberry for a look at the new Silver Creek Birding Trail.
It's not just for the hardcore birders. Anybody can come out here and enjoy this natural space.
Then, what the heck are voles and why are they eating people's trees? Kristen has the story. Stick around, that's all tonight, right here on Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
Particularly in the spring, all you need to do is walk out your door and listen. It's the season for birds. Common species like robins, blue jays, or black-capped chickadees can be spotted about anywhere. Add a feeder and attract more unique species like tanagers, indigo buntings, and orioles. In the UP, you'll find somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 different species of birds. A great way to see and hear them is by following one of the designated birding trails. I was in Newberry to talk about the new Silver Creek Birding Trail with DNR wildlife biologist Christy Sitar and birding expert Evan Griffiths.
The DNR decided that we wanted to kind of have a focal area for a project kind of close to town where we could draw people out onto the state forest system. We're probably 10-12 miles from the town of Newberry right now. And there's a chunk of land out here that is part of the state forest system, so it's open to the public for hunting and fishing and recreation. And we wanted to be able to showcase kind of a lot of different habitat projects and decided that it would be great to add a bird trail here as well. And we knew we were going to have Evan Griffiths, a high school student at Newberry High School, joining us for the school year this year. And he's a very skilled birder. And we thought this would be a great opportunity for him to help us develop this kind of a thing. And so we were really looking forward to his skills and abilities and helping us define this whole trail, lay it out on the ground, and get it up and running.
I've been interested in birding ever since I was very young, and I was watching bird feeders and birds in my yard, and I would read field guides and look at pictures of birds, and that's where my interest really began, was just seeing the birds and then realizing that outside I could see these birds that are in the books, and everything really came to life. And I think that's where I really became interested in birds. I first saw a common redpoll. That was what would be my spark bird, and it was a bird that I'd never seen before and I'd never heard of before. And seeing that just like caught this curiosity in me, and I wanted to find more. I wanted to see like all the kinds of birds that I could discover outside, and I realized what was really out there. And so that's what's been driving me for like the past 7 years of birding. It's really surprising to see what exists out there. This year I had the opportunity to work with the DNR as part of a job training program. For 2 hours every day, I would go in and I'd work with Christy Sitar, the wildlife biologist, and I would act as her intern. And we would do everything that she did for her job while also taking advantage of my birding skills, and she wanted to incorporate that into this birding trail. And I had the opportunity to put together a birding trail to educate the community about birds and also to draw in big-time birders from anywhere across the state that are passing through. So putting together this trail began in the fall, actually, and me and Christy Sitar would travel out here and drive around and take a look at habitat, because habitat is an important factor in determining what kinds of species are going to be here, and we wanted to encompass as many species as we could in this trail. Diversity is something that's very important to a birder, and we wanted to have as many species available to those that come looking for birds as possible. And we have a lot of different forest types, from a red pine plantation to mixed white pine, hardwoods, and aspen forests, and even bogs and wetlands and ponds like this one here. And those were all taken into consideration in choosing our stops, because getting the most diverse stops as we could, we knew we could draw focus to as many different species of birds that call these places home. And we'll have a lot of different breeding birds in this area, as well as the migrants that are passing through right now.
So the Silver Creek Birding Trail is in the state forest system. It's on state land, open to the public. As a result of that, it's forest that is managed. And so timber harvests are going to go on in different places, and the forest is going to change in age as it moves through to older age classes. The birding opportunities at different sites are going to change over time as well. The forest behind me now has hardwoods in it and some conifers in it. You can see hemlock. And there's also these understory trees in here that birds actually will use to nest in. Some birds nest high in the canopy, and some birds like to nest mid-canopy, and some birds are ground nesters.
Most of the stops on this trail are just along the roadside, where birders can stop and get out of their car and walk down the road and bird from there. But we also have several stops where you can park and walk down short nature trails, and they'll take you to bogs or to other clearings or areas of interest where you might find some different birds. To build that, we'll just be clearing off some parking spots along the roadside, and we'll be brushing out some trails so that people can walk down.
The two-track trail system that runs through the woods here that makes up the Silver Creek Birding Trail are forest roads, and so as a result they're not always in great shape. They're not the same quality as gravel roads. Sometimes they get worn down or get rutted and that sort of a thing, and so folks that are out here kind of need to make their own judgments up on how accessible it is depending on what they're driving, and we'll come out and manage it and maintain it as best as we can, but sometimes it's not going to be as accessible. This is also not open during the winter. None of these roads are plowed during the winter. So folks could still come out here and do some birding, but they could snowshoe or ski, or they might snowmobile out here, turn the sleds off and get out and walk around and look at the flooding and look at different habitats and catch different birds that might overwinter here in the UP as well.
As a part of this project, we're actually going to be putting up some bluebird nesting boxes in some clearings and doing some plantings of mass-producing shrubs and trees to attract even more birds like waxwings and bluebirds. Species such as warblers and vireos and many of the thrushes that we get in this area aren't attracted to those types of things, and they have to be searched for, and you can usually find them in the treetops or in the forest, and you won't find them nesting in any nest boxes. Many of the birds you'll encounter here on the Silver Creek Birding Trail actually stay through the summer, and they're breeding species such as chickadees and nuthatches, as well as winter wrens. A good number of the species that you see here are migrants. They don't spend the summers here. They will migrate farther north to nest. In the winter, we have species such as waxwings, crossbills, and pine grosbeaks. And those species actually often come south from Canada to spend their winters here where food is more abundant. And then they go back north come spring. And in spring, we get the migrants that fly up here. Some move on farther north to nest, while some of them stay to breed in this area. And in summer, you only find the breeding birds here. Come fall, around August and September, birds begin to migrate back south, and we get migrants coming from Canada and other areas that pass through here on their way to warmer places, and then come back to winter. We have our resident bird species. The diversity of the habitat types that we have here on this trail attract a wide variety of species, and some of those are unique to these different habitats. Winter wren is found here on the trail, and they really like boreal forests like this one here, and they can often be heard. They have a high-pitched, bubbly, warbling trill that is really recognizable, and it's a beautiful song to hear out here. Blackburnian warbler is a species that is of particular interest here, and they're a really beautiful bird. They have a bright orange throat, and they're warblers, so warblers are very desirable to birders. We have a large number of different species of warblers that can be found here. We also have American redstart, a warbler that nests in young deciduous forest. Black and white warbler can be found in the mature maple forest that is also on this trail. Black-throated green warbler also really like boreal forest. Yellow-rumped warbler can be found throughout migration and breeding season, and they're extremely common. The wetlands here make great habitat for ducks, and we can get bufflehead and wood duck and hooded merganser here on the water in this woodland pond. Ruffed grouse and woodcock can also be found in the deciduous forest. In the pine forest here, and especially the white pine forest, they make great habitat for species like brown creeper and red-breasted nuthatch and chickadee. Hermit thrush can also be found there, and Swainson's thrush passes through in migration. The Silver Creek Birding Trail is just one stop in the UP to look for birds, and the UP is really a great destination for birders because we have such a wide variety of habitats and also rare habitats such as bogs and other areas where you can find a lot of different bird species. Spring and migration make great times to go birding because birds are migrating at these times, and they pass through these areas in large numbers, and you can often find birds that don't breed here, and many birds breed farther north in Canada. Species that we find here in migration, like yellow-rumped warbler, can be found in greater numbers in spring, such as in May, and also in fall around September when they pass through here. Paying close attention to weather can also make for some great birding because on rainy days, birds tend to fall out from migration, and what that means is that they're no longer flying, they stop and rest in the trees to be protected from the weather. And in times like that, you can come out and find a lot of birds. But on clear sunny days, you can also find birds singing a lot more than usual, and birding by ear is something that's really important, and you can identify birds by ear and locate birds by ear and find lots of species and hear all kinds of species, and it really sounds like spring. When birding, it's important to respect the birds that you're observing. Always avoid approaching birds too closely, or if you know there's a nest, do not approach it because birds will actually abandon the nest if you interfere with it. Don't use playback to attract birds because hearing their songs will stress the birds out, and it will take them away from foraging for food or caring for their young. It's important to keep them safe and to respect them while birding. A lot of the birds that you see here on the trail you can actually even find in your own backyard, and some species you can even do things to help attract them. For species like Baltimore oriole, which we get breeding here in the Upper Peninsula, you can put out orange slices or grape jelly. They really seem to like that. Blue jay and woodpeckers, you can put out peanuts, and they even like corn sometimes. Sunflower seed is the go-to for all types of birds. You can attract grosbeaks, chickadees, nuthatches. Just about any seed-eating bird will come to sunflower seed. For finches such as red poles and goldfinches, if you put out thistle seed, they really seem to enjoy that. And suet is also good for woodpeckers. Putting up bird feeders is a great way to attract all different types of birds, but you can also attract other nuisance species such as bear or raccoon. So if you see any signs of this, it's a good idea to take those feeders down to avoid any conflict with those animals. Since I began birding at such a young age, when I was about 13 or so, it was hard for me to get out and go birding to all these great places that people talk about, all these great marshes and hot spots that people are seeing all kinds of birds. And to me, I had to depend on my parents' willingness to drive me to these places and to take me around in the backseat of the car and be looking for these birds. So that's how my birding adventures would go. And then once I turned 16 and I got my driver's license, things really changed, and the world opened up to me. And I could go birding to all these other places and do a little more exploring. And in that way I was able to access these more diverse habitats and learn even more about birds, which is what it's really all about. Birding is a great way to become involved in learning about birds and supporting bird conservation. But just going out and birding and learning more about birds is just a lot of fun. A good way to start doing that is by getting a field guide and just familiarizing yourself with birds of your area. Many people have a good idea of backyard birds they see, and often they see unfamiliar species that they don't recognize. Taking a picture with the camera is a great way to come back to that bird and match it up to a picture in a field guide. Cornell also offers an online program called Merlin Bird ID, and by uploading a picture the program will automatically identify the bird as the species, and that can be very helpful for new birders. As always, experience is a lot of help in birding, and learning bird songs and understanding their calls can really help in identification. The more you familiarize yourself with these birds, the more you'll begin to see the differences between them, and identification is a lot of fun. It's always a challenge and it takes lots of work, but anyone can come to enjoy it. There have been about 400 bird species that have been seen in the Upper Peninsula. There's a PDF available of the UP bird list as a checklist that you can take with you when you're birding. Find as many species as you can and check them off on this list.
We will have a kiosk out here. Once folks get out here, they'll be able to show up at that kiosk, which is coincidentally the start of the bird trail, pick up a map, find the spots, go out and drive around the bird trail and do some birding. And we will also have little road signs, of course, that tell people where to turn for different stops. Stop number 2 is here, and take this little trail to go down to stop number 8, etc. You know, this trail has some neat features on it and some neat birds, and it's kind of a way to get local folks interested in birding, hopefully.
Once we get the signs and the kiosk on the ground this summer, we're going to have an open house to show the public that this trail is here for them and that it's meant to be used by inexperienced and experienced birders alike, and anybody can come out here and enjoy this natural space. It's not just for the hardcore birders. There's a lot of forest and natural area out here that can be enjoyed by anybody, and it'll be a lot of fun to invite the public out here and have a little bit of an open house for everybody, and I'll even be giving birding tours if you're interested.
I live on the western end of the UP and had a few people approach me this spring that they had considerable damage to their trees over the winter, most likely from voles. Spring Valley Lodge and Orchard had damage to over 200 trees in their apple orchard.
I mean, it could be a number of things. Voles or rabbits are a couple of culprits that will gnaw on trees in the wintertime. A lot of prey species actually, have cycles in their population. You have, population explosions, and then you have population declines, and that happens a lot in rodents and rabbits and so forth. Most people will see evidence of voles when the snow is coming off the ground. They'll see the runways in their lawns and so forth, and that's an indication you've got voles.
So what is a vole? At first glance, a vole looks like a mouse and is sometimes referred to as a field mouse, but voles have shorter tails, smaller eyes, and small rounded ears that are often hidden by their thicker fur. Still a rodent, still a pest, and apparently they eat the bark off trees and shrubs.
They're vegetarians and they prefer grasses, but if they run out of grasses or they are staying closer to shelter, so forth, they will gnaw on trees for nutrition as well. Well, they'll gnaw on most trees. Thicker bark trees are not as appealing as thinner bark trees, and smaller trees you're going to notice much more damage to the point where they may have gnawed and girdled it to death. Larger trees you may not see as much damage, but they will, attack the upper roots and the lower trunks of all the trees. The bark itself doesn't have any nutrition for them, so they're trying to get into that what we call cambial layer and vascular layer, where they're getting the nutrients and so forth.
So is there anything you can do to save your trees?
If the tree has not been girdled, that means gnawed all the way around to the vascular layer, they may come back, and in that case you really don't necessarily need to do anything to the tree. I don't recommend usually using like a wound sealer or something. That tends to actually impede the callousing of the wound. The best thing to do is to just clean up any raw edges and hope the tree survives. But you can set up some preventative measures to keep it from happening again. You can do several things. You can do what we call habitat modification. Voles like tall grassy areas. So if you in the fall are mowing, the grass fairly short around the trees. If you have mulch around the trees, woody mulch, you want to rake that away from the base of the trees in the fall. If you have something like a gravel mulch, that actually will deter them, because again, they're looking for, the grasses to eat, and the stones expose them to the open, and they have a lot of predators. You can also do exclusion, and what you use there is the plastic tree sleeves or 1/4-inch hardware cloth, and you want to bury that a few inches in the soil around the tree, and you want it to be a few inches above the snow line because they will tunnel through the snow and so forth. The hardware cloth you can find at most hardware building supply stores, and you want to use that 1/4-inch mesh. Anything larger, the voles can actually squeeze through. And you want to have that in a cylinder that's several inches away from the trunk, because you want the trunk to be able to grow for several seasons before you have to adjust or remove it. Another habitat modification you can do is actually make sure you have some good perch trees for your avian predators, because hawks and owls really enjoy a good vole dinner. There's repellents on the market that are labeled for voles. The evidence for them, their effectiveness is not complete yet, and they're going to be a short-term solution. Every time it rains, you'd have to go out and spray these repellents and so forth. People can trap them if they have a small enough area. You can use things like mouse snap traps or small live animal traps if you have just a small area, small orchard or something to trap them.
Or build your own PVC vole bait station like my friend Don and Spring Valley Orchard did, and place it on the voles runway. Both have had success eradicating voles with these.
June 8th is Free Fishing Weekend here in Michigan, and you'll find events across the UP that coincide with that weekend. This year marks the 28th anniversary of Kids Fishing Day at Camp 7 Lake Campground in the Hiawatha National Forest. Kids Fishing Day is a long-standing free event introducing youth 16 years old and under to fishing. Free food donated by local merchants will be served up by the Beatty Knot Great Lakes sport fishermen. Raffle prizes include fishing rods, tackle boxes, and other outdoor items. On June 10th, the DNR will host a listening session on proposed deer regulation changes, including a proposed ban on the baiting and feeding of deer in portions of Menominee, Dickinson, and Delta counties. The meeting will run from 2 to 4 Eastern on June 10th in the Turtle Room at the Island Resort Casino. NRC Commissioner Dave Nyberg will attend the meeting. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next week right here on Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.